One thing that's annoyed me while watching seasonals over the years is the argument that you can't rate or judge a show after its first episode. While I do think you can't judge an entire show just by its first episode, I do believe you can judge and rate the episode itself. That is, if you judge it by how much it accomplishes before it ends, how much it makes you want to keep watching, and also how good it is as an introduction to the series. And when taking that metric into consideration, one show immediately came to mind.
Now, the main thing we'll be focusing on is the episode structure, aka the 3-act story. This structure is a staple of screenwriting for films, but the way Kill la Kill utilizes it to pace its first episode is incredibly interesting.
So let's crack this egg open and see what comes out. So, first scene. Right off the bat we have Mikisugi lecturing the class on the rise of the Nazi Party in Germany. Immediately we are setting up fascist and tyrannical overtones in the viewer's head. This is important because the next thing we as an audience see...
I'm on official business!
Yes, sir. We have a teacher immediately bowing down to the big blonde guy that blew his door down, which establishes that whoever this person is, they run things at this school. Well, that's kind of weird. I know this guy is big and intimidating, but what kind of power does he wield to keep all the students and teachers in line?
Sneaking a Goku uniform out! What were you planning on doing with it? You're not meant to wear it!
Let's rewind a bit. In 45 seconds, we've established a basic framework for the school's hierarchy. So what's next? Well, why not flex the budget? First action scene exists primarily to establish how Goku uniforms work, but also to give the audience a taste of the high-flying action and style that sets Kill la Kill apart from its competition. You get some lovely key animation from Takafumi Hori as Gamaguri beats the ever-loving shit out of this kid. So what have we got so far? We know the group that runs the school, we know they use these weird uniforms to keep the teachers and students in check, and we get a delicious sample of the action scenes the series is known for. And you know what the best part is? It's only been 3 minutes. Immediately afterwards, we get the introduction of our antagonist, Satsuki. How do we know she's our antagonist? Well, remember the lecture from 3 minutes ago? Since the first thing that was given to us was a lecture talking about the rise of the Nazi Party in Germany, we can freely infer from the way that Satsuki runs the school that she's our tyrannical dictator. So where are we now? We're 4 minutes in, and everything you need to know about the setting most of the show takes place in has been established.
With that done, we get this fantastic establishing shot that not only shows the disparity that exists between the elite Hanuji Academy and the shantytown below, but this shot is also used as a means of expressing how colossal of an opponent our protagonist is up against.
And title. With the school established, it's time to introduce Ryoko, our protagonist. How do we know she's our protagonist? See, that's another thing I love about this establishing shot. Since they start all the way up here with what we can clearly infer as the antagonist, and pin all the way down to this person, instantly we understand that Ryoko is our protagonist, without a word of dialogue. It's genius. We're introduced to her alongside the shantytown, giving us some world building while we get to know the protagonist. The way Ryoko is introduced is very similar to the opening of Aladdin, where we see the poverty and rundown nature of the shantytown while being introduced to our protagonist, while also setting up a juxtaposition against the more upscale lifestyle of the palace/academy. Kill la Kill reverses this by showing the school first and the shantytown after, whereas Aladdin starts with the shanty, so you can see how ridiculous the disparity in lifestyle is and why such luxury would appeal to Aladdin given his current way of life. Through her first interaction with someone, we learn that she's cocky, she's a brawler, and above all else, she doesn't put up with people's shit. And that's the first act. In 6 minutes and 45 seconds, we've established the antagonist, the protagonist, Goku uniforms, Hanuji Academy and its power structure, how the student council keeps everyone in check, and the setting. We're at the start of Act 2, time for some rising action. For the first half of Act 2, the show gives a bit more detail for everything they've introduced so far. The student council, the weird uniforms, the school and its hierarchy, but also our protagonist, including why she came to the school and her signature weapon, the scissor blade, which comes during... You know this confrontation is important already because the show has constantly been cutting to Satsuki up to this point. And it's been made pretty clear who the antagonist and protagonist are, so naturally their first meeting... is a bait and switch. Given everything we've been shown and told about Hanuji, the student council, and Satsuki, it would be pretty silly to assume Ryoko could waltz right up to Satsuki and take her out, right? Yep! This is a rude awakening to our cocky protagonist that if she wants to take on Satsuki, she'll have to find a way to level the playing field. In between Acts 2 and 3, we have the proper introduction of the Student Council. I don't have much to say about this scene except for they do set up a nice plot hook right here. The end of the second act in the 3-act story marks the point where the protagonist has tried and failed to defeat the obstacle they're facing and is at their lowest point trying to find an answer. In Ryoko's case, after she gets beaten senseless by the boxing club president, she heads back to her father's burned down house. I like this scene a lot because of the almost violent tone whiplash you get from it, cutting from the end of the batshit boxing fight to this somber moment of Ryoko searching through the burned down remains of the home she grew up in. You may say it's cheesy, but I say this is fundamental to Kill la Kill's identity and ability to resonate with its audience. It will go from a calm classroom to a high-flying whip fest, from a boxing beatdown to a sincere moment of reflection and remembrance in a second. And it works, it just adds to the insanity of it. Anyways, here we establish that Ryoko's father was murdered and the scissor blade is all he left behind and her only clue, explaining why she was desperately clinging to it during the boxing match. The scene serves as a means of digging into Ryoko's backstory and past, while also being the place she finds the answer to her Goku uniform problem, Senketsu.
Finally, the climax. So obviously this fight is great and it looks great, but I want to focus on 2 takeaways from it. One, it is technically excellent, not just in terms of animation, but also the sound design.
Sound design just in general I think is a wildly underappreciated part of production, so I'd like to take a second to highlight some really cool effects from this fight.
Good shit. Second, as you'll recall, this is the 3rd fight in this episode. That's right, there are 3 great fight scenes in the first episode. With most shows, you're lucky to get 1 good fight in the first episode.
And like everything else in this show, these 3 fights are incredibly fun and enjoyable to watch, while also being extremely efficient.
What do I mean by that? Well, let's take a look at how these fights play out. The 1-star versus 3-star is a complete beatdown. No uniform versus the 2-star is an even worse beatdown.
And Senketsu versus the 2-star is a bit more drawn out, but it's still ultimately a beatdown.
That right there establishes all the power scaling in the first episode. If you're wondering what power scaling is, it's an imaginary hierarchy a show establishes so you have a general idea of who is stronger than who and who would win in a fight between any 2 characters. Kinda like how everyone knows Goku and Vegeta are much stronger than Yamcha or Tien, or that characters like Hisoka and Netero are light years stronger than Gon or Killua. So how does the math add up here?
A 3-star uniform beats a 1-star, a 2-star uniform beats no uniform, and Senketsu beats a 2-star uniform. Now let's fill in the implied gaps here, and voila! And before you say it, some of you will probably think, like, duh. Of course a 3-star is better than a 2-star or a 1-star. It isn't interesting or profound to point that out. And you know what? You're right. But that wasn't the point. It's that it was accomplished visually through 3 really fun fights before the start of the second episode. Now, you'll probably notice that this leaves one part of the equation unanswered. What about Senketsu versus the 3-star? This is intentionally left unanswered to build up the inevitable conflict between Ryoko and the Student Council, aka another hook. So, back to the original question I asked. Why is Kill la Kill's first episode so good? To answer that, let's circle back to the other questions I asked at the beginning of the video. 1. What did it accomplish? Well, it established Goku uniforms and how they work, the paradigm that exists within the school, the hierarchy of the student council, who Satsuki's mother is and why she has so much power, the setting, the antagonist, the protagonist, Mako, the main character's ultimate weapon, Senketsu, what happened to Ryoko's dad, Ryoko's motivation, and all the power scaling. 2. Does it make the viewer want to keep watching? Well, it has 3 excellent fight scenes, tons of great character animation and sharp visuals, a mini character arc for the protagonist, and several plot hooks that make the viewer wonder what will happen next. All delivered with a 3-act structure that makes it feel like a bombastic, over-the-top blockbuster.
And 3, is it a good introduction to and representation of the show? Kill la Kill establishes a lot of information and plot points in the first episode. That efficiency alone can account for a lot of why the first episode of Kill la Kill is great, but that faster-than-a-bullet pacing and frantic structure is the lifeblood
Fiber
of Kill la Kill. It establishes a lot in the first episode, but this act of moving from scene to scene rapidly is also a big part of what makes Kill la Kill work as a whole. A lot of people will describe their watching experience with Kill la Kill as insane or crazy, and the pacing is a big part of why. There's an episode later in the show where, spoilers, Senketsu gets ripped into hundreds of pieces and spread out across the country, and yet Ryoko recovers all of them before the episode ends. It is very fast, but as we established from the first episode, its ability to create an absurd, over-the-top, fast and loud watching experience, and its ability to be extremely efficient, to me,
are the key elements that when combined make Kill la Kill so fucking good, at least when looking at it from a structural perspective. First episode embodies this seamlessly, while also showing off a lot of the elements that the show has become known for in later episodes. It's an excellent introduction to the show, establishes basically everything you need to know to understand the setting and characters, and does a great job of hooking the viewer. It's a start to finish barn burner of a first episode, and I hope I've given ample explanation as to why it's great.